long-buried confessions of those who had joined in the mass extermination of fellow human beings. Sheaths of mysterious notes were discovered, in bottles and cases, buried near the ruins of crematoriums at the Auschwitz concentration camp. They were badly degraded and difficult to decipher, but advances in digital technology have made many of them legible.
Our work consisted first of receiving them. They were told they would have a shower, and when they were all naked, they went further into the death chamber.
Our unit is called the Sonderkommando.
The notes were written by Jewish prisoners who, in exchange for being spared death, guided victims to the gas chambers and disposed of their corpses.
A young boy said, "But you are a Jew. How will you be allowed to lead these pure Jews to the gas, only to save yourself?"
I am an ordinary human being, but even I have grown accustomed to this task. Someone screams, but people look on indifferently, as at an everyday matter.
How did they bring themselves to assist in the deaths of their fellow Jews? If you had been in their position, what course would you have taken? These are the confessions of the members of the Sonderkommando. During that time, people said once you entered, you would never return alive. And they called the entrance the gate of death. During World War II, thousands of people were killed daily in gas chambers here. But as the end of the war neared, Nazi forces largely destroyed the facilities in an attempt to conceal the evidence.
Który został wydobyty z ziemi właśnie w tym miejscu, które tutaj widzimy. Nie jesteśmy dokładnie w stanie sprecyzować dokładnego punktu, z którego te notatki zostały wyjęte z ziemi. Natomiast na pewno był to ten teren, który widzimy tutaj. Po prostu ludzie, którzy wchodzili na ten teren po wojnie, czasami z tego terenu, z jakichś zagłębień znaleźli coś, co ich interesowało, wydawało się czymś ciekawym, a żeby były czymś przykryte takim, co wzbudzi zainteresowanie człowieka, który znajdzie się na tym terenie. Dlatego pod spód miejsca, gdzie chowano notatniki, kładziono najczęściej troszkę ludzkich kości.
The mysterious notes had been placed in bottles and cases and buried in the ground. Caches of these notes were discovered on 8 occasions after 1945 in the vicinity of the same crematorium. From the faint traces of writing that remained on these documents, it was determined they might be of great value.
Bo większość niestety. Oczywiście próby odczytania tych notatek zostały podjęte zaraz po tym, jak może, czy to w latach 80., czy nawet 90., nie było takich możliwości. Technicznie wartość tych zapisków to jest właśnie to, że widzimy przebieg masowej zagłady.
For the past 6 years, Technicians at the Auschwitz archives have applied advanced technology to the task of deciphering documents that have long remained unread.
To jest jeden z tych wariantów, których wydaje się, że tekst jest w istotnym stopniu czytelniejszy niż na oryginale.
Passing the documents through specialized filters brought out words written in the Yiddish alphabet. Yiddish was the language used by the Jewish population of Eastern Europe. Further analysis of the handwriting revealed that 3 of the 8 stashes of buried notes were likely written by the same person. The notes include initials that are thought to be those of the writer's name. His wife's name, Deborah, also appears. And the name of a town is recorded as Makov Mazowiecki.
Więcej domów żydowskich było po prawej stronie. Tu tak raczej nie ma tych domów już drewnianych żydowskich, zostały zburzone, bo nikt nie wracał. Oni się tego nie spodziewali. Po prostu zostali raptownie zgromadzeni w getcie i unicestwieni przez wywózkę do Oświęcimia.
The flames of virulent anti-Semitism were fanned by the Nazi Führer Adolf Hitler.
Die Völker noch einmal in einen Weltkrieg zu stürzen, dann wird das Ergebnis nicht sein, sondern die Vernichtung der jüdischen Rasse in Europa.
The Nazis gathered the Jews in occupied countries and sent them to various concentration camps with a plan to annihilate the Jewish people. Before the war, nearly 4,000 Jews lived in Makov Mazowiecki, but 80% of them were sent to concentration camps. At a cultural center, there are documents that established a link to one of the men who buried notes at Auschwitz.
Na początku wojny, II wojny światowej, z 1939 roku, tutaj jest grupa mężczyzn z Makowa, która została zmuszona do robót na rzecz Niemców. Drugi mężczyzna z prawej strony jest to Leib, ten pan w okularach.
The initials of his name match those that appear in the notes. He was a religious leader in the Jewish community in his early 30s.
Miał córkę na wydaniu, Dwojrę bądź Deborę, nie wiemy do końca jaki jest zapis imienia. Wiadomo, że wziął ślub z Deborą 31 grudnia 1935 roku. Z czasem przejął funkcję Diana po swoim teściu i to była bardzo taka reprezentacyjna, ważna funkcja dla gminy żydowskiej. Nie każdy Żyd mógł zostać Dianem. Musiała to być osoba posiadająca bardzo dobre wykształcenie.
This is footage of Makov Mazowiecki during the time Leib Langfuss lived there. Jews were confined to a ghetto just a few square kilometers in size, where they were abused by the Nazis. One of the 3 sheaves of notes that Langfuss buried described what took place during that time. It is entitled Deportation.
October 31st, 1942. The Makov ghetto was wrapped in silence. German police came before the evening, and the first harsh order was given. Those who can work are going to Auschwitz. Everyone was shaking. People were agitated, horrified, and screaming. My son stared at his mother, and then he began to cry hysterically. "Papa, I want to live. Do everything you can so I can stay alive." My healthy little boy was about to die, and I had no way to protect him from ruthless murderers. How tragic for his mother, who can't do anything but shed tears.
One month later, Langfuss, with his wife and son, arrived at their dreaded destination.
The death selection began.
What awaited transports on their arrival was the sorting out of those who appeared capable of working from those who didn't.
People were forced to stand upright in the cold. Fear penetrated to the marrow of their bones.
Those who were judged unsuitable for working were sent to the gas chambers. Langfuss was selected to work. But the work was not simply physical labor. He was forced to participate in the mass exterminations as a member of a Sonderkommando, a German term for special unit.
Siłą rzeczy nie ma oficjalnych dokumentów na ten temat. Po pierwsze, no oczywiście dlatego, że władze obozowe nie były w ogóle zainteresowane tym, żeby gdziekolwiek pojawiła się informacja o tym, że coś takiego jak Sonderkommando w ogóle istniało. Przedstawiające to o czym mówię, czyli proces masowej zagłady, one są takie ważne, no bo są absolutnie unikatowe. Widzimy proces spalania zwłok na otwartym powietrzu, w takich dołach spaleniskowych.
The only photographs of the Sonderkommando at work were taken clandestinely. What appears to be a mound of corpses is being burned. Working at the site are members of a Sonderkommando. Langfuss faced an excruciating decision. Should I continue to live by assisting in the mass extermination, or should I resist, knowing I might be killed? Langfuss chose to cooperate with the Nazis as a member of a Sonderkommando. As the analysis of the caches of documents buried near the crematoriums proceeded, it was discovered that all of them had been written by members of Sonderkommando units. 12 pages of notes that were unearthed in 1980 were written in Greek. The name inscribed in the notes was Marcel Nadjari. It was learned that he was a former soldier in his mid-20s.
I'll explain the lovely work that the Almighty wanted to have us perform.
Nadjari's notes exposed the brutal duties of the Sonderkommando and the high degree of systemization of the mass extermination program. At its height, 5 crematoriums were used at the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp. 4 of these were demolished in order to conceal the evidence, leaving just one of them still standing. This is a visualization of a crematorium based on diagrams discovered after the war and Nadjari's descriptions.
There were 2 enormous cellars underground. The first was the stripping room, and the second was the death chamber. Our work consisted first of receiving them. Most did not know the reason. They were breaking down and sobbing. They were told they would have a shower, and when they were all naked, they went further into the death chamber, suspecting nothing.
After all of the people were packed into the gas chamber, a toxic pesticide called Zyklon B was poured in from above. People in the chamber suffered in agony for as long as 20 minutes before dying of suffocation.
After a half hour, our work began again. We opened the doors and carried out the corpses of these innocent women and children.
One of the duties was to cut hair from the corpses and to remove gold crowns from their teeth. The hair was used to stuff cushions, and the gold was melted into bars and sold. The next stage was the work of obliterating all evidence of the mass extermination.
An elevator raised the corpses to the room with the ovens where they were burned. They burned with the fat on their bodies. The Germans forced us to crush the bones that remained into ash. A person produced only about 640 grams of ashes. The ashes were dumped in a nearby river. Thus, they eliminated all traces.
The entrance to the concentration camp bore this slogan: The unearthed notes reflect the agony and distress the writers experienced. Though Nadjari's parents and sister had been exterminated, he chose to stay alive.
How could I or anybody else do this work and burn fellow believers? Many times I thought about joining them in order to end everything. However, what kept me from doing so was revenge. I want to live to revenge the deaths of Dad and Mom and my beloved sister Nellie.
Leib Langfuss wrote frankly about his inner struggle in a bundle of notes entitled Particulars.
Many people were pushed into the gas chamber. Those who resisted were shot to death or bitten by dogs. A girl of about 8 shouted, "Get away, you Jewish murderer! Don't lay your hands on my beautiful brother!" A young boy said, "But you are a Jew. How will you be allowed to lead these pure Jews to the gas, only to save yourself? Is your life among the murderers dearer than the lives of so many Jewish victims?"
Langfuss was separated from his wife and son on the day they arrived at Auschwitz. He re-encountered them in a way he would never have imagined.
The people were pressed against each other in 5 or 6 layers. Mothers were left clutching their children, men and women hugging each other. The gas turned some of the bodies blue, while others seemed to sleep peacefully. I learned afterwards that my wife and son were among them. How great is our shame!
One survivor broke many years of silence after the Sonderkommando accounts were deciphered. Heinz Cuneo, a Jew of Greek descent, is 93. He was sent to Auschwitz when he was only 15 years old.
What a wonderful lens you have.
Μία πύρινη φλόγα, άλλα 10 μέτρα και από εκεί και από πάνω ένας μαύρος καπνός, γκρι μαύρος καπνός, ανέβαινε στον ουρανό και αυτές ήταν οι ψυχές των ανθρώπων που καίγανε στο Auschwitz. Έφταναν μέρες που σκοτώναν την ημέρα 10.000 ανθρώπους. Και εκεί θα μάθετε να γίνετε και φιλογερμανοί.
Cuneo was able to speak German. By working with the Nazis as a translator, he was allowed to live.
Ήταν πιο χειρότερη εμπειρία από τη διάρκεια που ήσασταν στο Auschwitz.
Είναι η μεγάλη ερώτηση αυτή.
Λίγο πιο μικρή την ερώτηση.
Δυστυχώς. Η πείνα. Πείνα. Όταν πεινάει κανείς πολύ και δεν είχε να φάει για λίγες μέρες, τραυλίζει, δεν μπορεί να μιλήσει, δεν μπορεί να φωνάξει. Όλοι αυτοί εδώ έπρεπε να πάνε σε νοσοκομείο.
Cuneo showed us photographs of his fellow prisoners who were emaciated. Their weight had fallen to as little as 35 kilograms. Another deciphered cache of notes addressed at length the question of how ruthless people might become when they are held under extreme conditions. The name that was inscribed in the notes was Zalman Leventhal. We know that he was a Polish Jew in his 20s, but it is not known if he had a family or what kind of work he did.
I am an ordinary human being. People with ordinary human tendencies, not corrupt, not murderous, but people with hearts and feelings grow accustomed to this task. Someone screams, but people look on indifferently, as at an everyday matter. Our intelligence is subconsciously influenced by the impulse to remain alive. The only ones who remain are second-class simple people. You try to convince yourself your life doesn't matter. You want only the general good. But the truth is, I want to live at any price.
We continued our research in order to deepen our understanding of the Nazis' motives in devising this inhumane system. The German Federal Archives contain several thousand reports on the Nazi mass extermination program. Among them, we discovered this record of an oral account by a former SS member who worked in the crematoriums. He directed members of the Sonderkommando to incinerate the corpses. The ovens were only used to cremate the corpses of prisoners who died while working in the camp, he testified. Prisoners were never gassed there during my service. Were the members of the SS actually unaware of what took place in the gas chambers? Andreas Killian is a historian. Harboring these same doubts, Killian visited and interviewed numerous former Nazi SS members.
Wenn die Häftlinge zu schwach waren, zu schwach zum Gehen, dann wurden die ausgekippt vor dem Krematorium und wir wurden dann sozusagen auch in die Gaskammer gebracht. Aber ansonsten hat man von den Menschen, die reingingen, nichts wieder gesehen. Völlig unschuldig. Der Rauch war verräterisch, der Geruch war verräterisch, die starken Flammen bei extremen Verbrennungsprozessen auch. Aber rein äußerlich konnte man sonst nichts von dieser Mordaktion oder diesen Mordaktionen feststellen.
A post-war trial prosecuted the crimes of mass extermination. Adolf Eichmann, the architect of the program of moving Jews into concentration camps, gave this testimony. I did not kill a single Jew. The Sonderkommando documents revealed to historians how the Nazis skillfully controlled the members of the units.
So you do see in the manuscripts and what the Sonderkommando write that they are prepared to criticise not just themselves but each other. This is a page where he's actually talking about there were a small number of Russian, and he summarises, or he sort of tries to characterise what they're like, and says they don't really want to think. It's just like, just do it and that's it. Obviously, Jews from very different backgrounds, coming from Greece as Sephardic Jews, Jews coming from Poland as Ashkenazi Jews, have different traditions, different ways of being Jewish, and from both of their points of view, it can be that they don't see the other group as adhering to real Jewish traditions.
Historical investigation has revealed that Sonderkommando units included Jews from at least 14 countries, along with Soviet prisoners of war. In addition, their ages ranged from 15 to 56, reflecting a conscious decision to select members from different generations.
Einer der SS auch nicht sehr unnütz war, dass je unterschiedlicher die Häftlinge im Sonderkommando waren, umso unhomogener war die Gruppe an sich. Dadurch hatte man sicherlich auch den Hintergedanken, Widerstand zu verhindern, denn wenn sich Häftlinge untereinander aufgrund unterschiedlicher Sprachen und die man vor allen Dingen grundsätzlich unter der deutschen Besatzung sich zunutze machte, weil nur durch Konflikte problemloser herrschen und unterdrücken. Das war sozusagen letztlich gesehen eine Erfahrung der deutschen Besatzungspolitik, die sich dann wiederum sehr günstig auch in der Vernichtungspolitik umsetzen ließ.
While Germany secretly proceeded with annihilating the Jews, it engaged on the Eastern Front in fierce warfare with the Soviet Union. However, after the end of 1942, Germany began to suffer a succession of losses across the battle zone. In the concentration camp, the Sonderkommando members became aware of the shift in the tide of the war. Zalman Leventhal, the man who had written "I Want to Live at Any Price," wrote about this in his notes.
At that time, the great attack had begun in the east. Every day, we saw how the Russians were approaching. All of these events must be preserved by those of us who have remained alive. We did all we could, endangering the lives of the whole group, to send out material that would interest the whole world concerning these murders.
Members of the Sonderkommando entrusted their information to Polish intelligence agents who had infiltrated the concentration camp and made contact with the men. The spies had been sent by Polish nationals who had established a government in exile in the United Kingdom. They hoped evidence of the mass extermination program would turn world opinion in their favor. A recording was made after the war of a former intelligence agent describing her experiences.
Ta dokumentacja, która do nas trafiała z obozu Auschwitz, no i przez tych ludzi, którzy uczestniczyli w tym tak zwanym Sonderkommando, prawda, przy likwidacji. I były spisywane na różnych skrawkach papieru, jaki tam, prawda, pod ręką kto miał, na takim zapisał nazwiska, o ile, prawda, mogli tam dotrzeć do tych nazwisk, a jeśli nie mogli, no to liczyli tylko osoby, na sztuki po prostu, prawda. No to wtedy postanowiono, że trzeba by, powiedzmy, przekazać to już do Komendy Głównej w Warszawie. No i chodziło także o to, żeby, powiedzmy, jakoś świat się dowiedział o tym, co się tutaj dzieje, prawda.
Archives in Poland contain illuminating documents from that period.
Była to nota dyplomatyczna rządu polskiego, który w tym czasie, w okresie II wojny światowej, działał na emigracji. Podstawą do napisania tej noty był tajny raport dostarczony w listopadzie 1942 roku przez Jana Karskiego do rządu polskiego na emigracji w Londynie.
The report was sent to governments of the Allied nations in December 1942. It read as follows. All the reports agree that the total number of killed runs into many hundreds of thousands of innocent victims, men, women, and children, and that of the 3,130,000 Jews in Poland before the outbreak of war, over a third have perished during the last 3 years. The note said it hoped world governments would see the necessity of condemning the crimes committed by the Germans and punishing the criminals, and also of offering the hope that Germany might be effectively restrained from continuing to apply her methods of mass extermination.
Treść noty spowodowała wielkie poruszenie, ponieważ po raz pierwszy opinia publiczna międzynarodowa dowiedziała się, jak jest naprawdę na ziemiach okupowanych. Mianowicie był to pierwszy oficjalny dokument o Holokauście.
The unique photographs of Sonderkommando units performing their duties were likewise smuggled out of the camp in a toothpaste tube.
In the course of our labor, we saw the reality. Time was passing, and nothing was done. We began to demand, to insist, that those on the outside find a swift solution. But unfortunately, it was not as we had imagined.
Why did the Sonderkommando appeals for help go unheard? An internal government document has come to light in the United Kingdom. The British were among the nations informed about the mass extermination program by the Polish government in exile. However, in January 1943, the British secretly communicated the following concerns to the American State Department. There is a possibility that the Germans may change over from the policy of extermination to one of extrusion, embarrassing other countries by flooding them with alien immigrants. The message continued. Allied criticism would probably result if any marked preference were shown in removing Jews from territories in enemy occupation. In Britain and the US, discontent was rising among the general population who believed their jobs were being taken by Jews fleeing Nazi persecution.
We felt anti-Semitism at every turn. No one wanted to take in even one Jew. We Jews were being lost.
In the midst of this, a development occurred that forced the hand of the members of the Sonderkommando.
Soon afterward, we learned they were preparing to bring Hungarian Jews to be cremated. Hands would now be forced to be dipped in the blood of the Jews of Hungary.
The Nazis were planning to transport large numbers of Jews from newly occupied Hungary to Auschwitz. Upon learning this, members of the Sonderkommando laid plans to take the final step at their disposal. They planned to join together in a revolt and demolish the crematoriums, the factories of death.
It was agreed the revolt would take place on Friday.
members of the Sonderkommando who appeared to have been divided against each other had secretly begun to form a network. Of the 3 men who wrote the buried documents, at least 2 worked together on the plan.
The entire commando, regardless of class differences, furiously demanded to put an end to this game, to stop this labor, and even to end our lives if we had to. Beginning at 4 o'clock, we are going to wipe out the guards, about 10 in number, and take their weapons. At 5 o'clock, the night shift goes on duty, about 20 men. Our commando falls upon them, 5 of us assigned to each one of them. Some of us can use machine guns. After wiping out the 20 guards, half of us will attack the other guards, and the other half will head to the camp. We will set fire to all of the barracks at the same time. No one deceived himself that he would be saved by this. We knew very well that we were going towards certain death. Nevertheless, everyone was satisfied. Blowing up the crematorium was the decision and our plan.
However, a fateful development intervened.
At the last minute, something happened. We were informed that 300 men from the crematorium would be shipped out.
We must disappear from the face of the earth, because we know so much about the unimaginable methods of their abuses and reprisals.
At the same time, the Nazis were developing a plan of their own. This was the execution of all the members of the Sonderkommando units in order to conceal evidence of the mass extermination. While resigned to their deaths, the members of the Sonderkommando did not abandon their efforts. They took paper and pens from the possessions of the people sent to the gas chambers and began documenting the extermination program in great detail. They buried their notes near the crematoriums in the hope that they would someday see the light of day. The men delivered an exposé of the mass killing, as well as their confessions for having lived as betrayers of their own people.
I am not afraid of dying, but that I won't be able to avenge myself the way I would like to. My only wish is that what I am writing reaches your hand.
The history of Auschwitz-Birkenau as a labor camp, and especially as a death camp for millions, will be told, so I hope, to the world by civilians. And I believe that even today the world knows of these horrors.
We are now going to the sauna. We are convinced they are taking us to our death. I would request that my various writings of the past, signed with the initials YARA, and buried in jars and boxes in the courtyard of crematorium number 2, be collected. Today is November 26, 1944.
Two months after that note was written, Auschwitz was liberated by the Soviet army. massive numbers of corpses that could not be completely hidden were discovered in trenches nearby. At Auschwitz and the other death camps, an estimated 6 million people were massacred. Most of the members of the Sonderkommando are thought to have been executed to ensure their silence. While we were producing this program, we learned that the daughter of one of the men who wrote the clandestine notes was living in Greece.
Καλησπέρα, καλησπέρα. Ελάτε, please, come.
Καλησπέρα.
Εδώ είναι το 1971, το Μάρτιο, είναι η τελευταία φωτογραφία που πάρθηκε από τον παπά μου. Αγαπούσε πολύ, εμένα με αγαπούσε πάρα πολύ. Μου έδωσε και το όνομα της αδερφής του που είχε χάσει στο πόλεμο και την είχε πολύ αδερφή.
Her name is Nelly, the daughter of Marcel Nadjari. Just before the liberation of Auschwitz, her father snuck into a group of people being transferred to another camp and miraculously was able to escape. Nothing is known of the fate of the other two men, Langfus and Leventhal, after November 1944. During the remainder of his life, Nadjari never talked about his experiences at the crematoriums.
Γιατί εμείς γυρίσαμε και οι άλλοι πεθάναμε. Διότι ήταν τουλάχιστον στη Θεσσαλονίκη. Όταν το 96% των Εβραίων σκοτωθήκαν, αυτοί οι λίγοι, το 4% που καταφέραν και γυρίσανε, αυτοί αισθανόντουσαν τύψη, είπανε τι κάναμε εμείς και γλιτώσαμε.
Τις νύχτες είχε φιάλτες, αλλά εντάξει, η μαμά μου δεν μ' άφηνε να τα ακούσω αυτά. Δηλαδή με προστάτευε από αυτά. Αλλά είχε δυσκολίες να κοιμηθεί. Θυμάμαι πάντα κοιμότανε με μία μάσκα. Γιατί δεν ήθελε να κρατήσω την αθωότητα της παιδικής μου ηλικίας. Δεν ήθελε να μου περάσει αυτό το βάρος σαν παιδί. Όχι σαν παιδί. Μετά μου έλεγε ότι θα μου πει πιο πολύ σε λεπτομέρεια όταν θα γίνει 18.
Nadjari died in 1971 when Nelly was 14 years old. Nelly first learned about her father's notes some 45 years after he died.
Και ήταν σαν ένα γράμμα από την άλλη μεριά, δηλαδή πραγματικά. Κάτι άλλο, δεν μπορώ, ούτε λόγια δεν έχω. Ήταν πολύ συγκινητικό. Με πονάει που ο πατέρας μου έπρεπε να περάσει όλο αυτό το πράγμα και εντάξει, όσο ζούσε δεν μου έλεγε γι' αυτό, αλλά μετά όταν έμαθα δεν μπορούσα και να πιστέψω ότι ένα άτομο σαν τον παπά μου που είχε τόσο ζωή μέσα του και τόσο χιούμορ και τόσο ήταν πάντα χαμογελαστός και μας έκανε όλους να γελάμε, πώς ήταν έτσι μετά από όλα αυτά που πέρασε.
In the notes he left behind, the phrase, "I want to live to revenge the deaths," left a deep impression on Nelly.
Νομίζω ότι η εκδίκηση πιο πολύ ήταν ότι επέζησε, ότι και θα μπορούσε να γράψει αυτό και να αποδείξει τι είχε γίνει σε αυτό το φρικτό μέρος. Το που πήρε μια δεύτερη ευκαιρία στη ζωή, νομίζω ήταν ένα δώρο που πήρε.
At Auschwitz, a World Heritage Site of deep tragedy, the members of the Sonderkommando confronted unprecedented moral dilemmas. They were compelled to join in the most extreme cruelty that humanity has ever been capable of. Is it possible to remain untouched by the pain of others? The confessions of these ordinary men transcend time and pierce our hearts. One bundle of notes ends with these words.
This is still not the whole truth. The truth as it really exists is immeasurably more tragic and terrible. Notebooks are buried in several places. Keep looking. You will still find more.